Hello, and welcome to another edition of Exclusive Interview, coming to you from the studios of 84 TV Radio Abuja, Nigeria. Have you ever sat down in your living room one day and all of a sudden you hear the pitter-patter of droplets of rain? And gradually it builds up into a storm in the middle of the dry season. Well, if you've experienced that, then maybe you've seen the first signs of climate change. Climate change has been causing devastation to life forms all over the earth, and it's about time that we do something about it. Take a look at this report.
Researchers have provided evidence that Africa could be the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. This reason is not far-fetched, due to the fact that developing countries in Africa have experienced and are vulnerable to the impact of climate change because of access to limited climate information, institutions, financial resources, and limited adaptation capacity. Nigeria, as one of the most populous nations with over 170 million people in Africa, is not exempted. Nigeria has been adversely affected by climate change due to its vulnerability and low coping capacity. Also, the peculiarity of the country as one of the leading exporters of crude oil faces the danger of balancing global energy demands and engulfs on the need to address climate change and environmental considerations. One major event revolving around climate change in Nigeria is the drying up of Lake Chad. The southern part of Lake Chad is the part of the section of the lake that lies inside Nigerian territory. Some years back, Lake Chad covered an estimated area of over 40,000 kilometers, while presently it now covers 1,300 kilometers square. The implication of this occurrence is that the land is laid to wastages by rising temperature, which leads to the southwards expansion of the Sahara Desert. Hence, farmlands and surrounding villages have become barren due to the overpowering nature of advancing desertification, whose ripple effects have led to the massive migration of people in search of more fertile land. On the show today, we speak to the world-renowned climate change, environmental law and policy, and renewable energy expert, Dr. John Osonwa, who unpacks the issues and explores the solutions to climate change.
Thanks for staying with us on Exclusive Interview. I'm now joined by environmentalist Dr. John Osonwa. Good morning, Dr. Osonwa.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, global warming is a term that is not only scientific, it's taken on a whole political argument in recent times. You know, is it real? Is it not real? Are we having more or less hurricanes? And what implications for Nigeria? So I would just like to find out from you, what are the core areas in which global warming is affecting the planet?
First of all, global warming is not a political issue. Despite what some people are saying. We have a lot of science, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of empirical evidence to show that clearly the climate is changing and not for the better. In terms of the areas of impact of climate change, we can look at 6 areas. You can look at climate change is wreaking havoc on the oceans and lakes of the world. We look at what it's doing on land, shoreline, erosion. When you now come inland, the desertification issue, land degradation, agricultural impacts are very profound. Then we look at what is happening with security. Climate change is what we call a threat multiplier, in the sense that it amplifies existing threats and makes issues intractable and prolonged. We look at what is happening with the heat waves and temperature. That also demonstrates that there's a palpable change in our climate pattern. over the last 100 years. So climate change is real, and it has multiple impacts, touching on so many aspects of our lives.
And I would like us to focus on at least two of the most urgent that could inspire action, especially from our government here in Nigeria. One of them is food security.
Yes.
The other is, well, actual security,
Yes.
keeping safe
Real
from the threats
security.
that we face.
Yes.
So where food is concerned, how could this affect us?
Climate change has myriad impacts on agricultural production. We begin with the issue of land desertification. Right now in Africa, we are being threatened. We have the Sahara Desert and the whole Sahel region, and that area is being eroded by desertification, in the sense that the sand is drifting. You have dust blowing south, but more than that, the land is being degraded. Land that used to be arable land is now become aridified, what we call desertification process. And essentially what it means is that that land will no longer be able to support crops, will no longer be able to support livelihoods. So people are being forced to migrate away from desertified lands. Prolonged heat waves and lack of moisture, lack of rain also is leading to droughts in so many areas. Ethiopia, even South Africa, Kenya, so many people in Africa, particularly north of Africa, are experiencing drought. Sudan, Niger. Then you look at the issue of water resources. Lake Chad has shrunk by over 90% in the last 30 years. We have satellite images. Lake Chad used to be about 25,000 square kilometers. Now it's only about 2,000. Then you look at the issue of the quality of the soil that you're using for agriculture. Climate change strips away the nutrients because the soil becomes too hot. And if you look at the microbiology in the soil is affected negatively. So that also affects the fertility of the soil and leads to low yields, crop failures in some cases. Then you look at the issue of availability of land. Because much of the land is being degraded by desertification, people are now fighting for land resources. People are now struggling to eke out a living from the oceans and the lakes because aquaculture is being threatened. Fishermen can't find the harvest that they used to have. So climate change is a major threat to food security and national security.
Now let's move on to national security. There are people who believe that this farmer-herder conflict is directly connected to climate change and its impact, especially when you consider what's happening at the Lake Chad, which, as you pointed out, has reduced by about 90%.
Yes.
So can you paint for us the picture of the link between climate change and these conflicts that we're seeing these days? Because some people feel it's a question of aggression or simple aggression. Is it that, or is it a little more complicated?
It is mostly related to climate change in this way. At any particular time in Nigeria, you have about 20 million cattle that must graze every single day. You have about 40 million sheep. You have about 50 million goats. This livestock, they need to feed. And you just don't have enough resources in the frontline northern states anymore. As I said, desertification is eating into Nigeria. Half a kilometer every year is being eroded. And right now, the 11 frontline states in Nigeria, closer to Niger, Chad, Cameroon, are facing massive desertification. So the herdsmen do not have enough resources in those areas. So they are forced to migrate to where you have greener pastures, where you have water for the animals to drink. The quantum of cows we have in Nigeria, they need about 1 billion liters of water to survive every single day. And you're not going to provide that through boreholes and all these things. You need streams, you need lakes, you need large bodies of water to graze your cattle. So as they are migrating southward, you have people who have historically used their ancestral lands for agriculture. Nigeria is primarily an agricultural economy. Over 70% of us are involved in agriculture in one way or the other. GDP of Nigeria is dependent on agriculture, even we have oil. So as the herders are migrating southwards, they are now clashing with people who are doing farming. So in most cases, just subsistence farming, not even commercial agriculture. So you're going to have this tension, which we need to do something about.
What do we need to do?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to understand that there are multifaceted issues involved. As you pointed out, some people see it simply as bandits, marauding all over the land. But we need to understand that there are complex issues. Climate change is a major part of it. What do we need to do? We need to have education, awareness creation, and we need to have a changed system of rearing livestock in the country. One of the things that we've talked about is whether you can have clusters in most states where cattle breeding is a major part of the economy. If you can have clusters where government will help to create foliage, create fodder, create grass and water resources, so that you don't have the migratory pattern we have now, which is leading to clashes. Those things are possible. Of course, the issue has always been the nomenclature that we use. People are wrestling with the nomenclature, but I think there is a need to have those kinds of establishments are necessary now, because the migratory pattern is not sustainable as we are seeing now.
Because there is also development happening.
Yes.
And that is something that I would like us to get into. But first of all, we'll take a break. And when we come back, we'll be talking about development, urban development, and how it's eating into Nigerian forests. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Exclusive Interview. I'm still having a chat with Dr. John Osonwa, who's an environmentalist, and we've been looking at climate change and its implication for Nigeria, how it connects to some of the strains that we've been experiencing as a people over the years. And one of those things is urban development, construction, and we're even talking about housing deficits and all of that.
Yes.
But what tends to happen is we lose trees, plants and forests.
Yes.
And we don't really build our environment with special consideration
Yes.
to greenery and some of that. It's even difficult for you to have parks
Yes.
remain as parks for a long time. They usually end up being sold, or you bump into someone who says, "Oh, well, I'm just this is my ancestral land. I'm going to do a layout and sell everything off." And in many cases, these are forest reserves. So, what is going on there, and how can we tackle it?
Well, as you correctly pointed out, deforestation is one of the reasons that we are being ravaged by climate change, because the primary cause of climate change is carbon dioxide. We're putting out 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide globally every year now. And the natural way to sequester carbon is through trees. Trees are designed naturally to take in the carbon, yes, and then put out oxygen. So it's a natural symbiosis which we are displacing. So when you strip away your trees and your greenery, you now have more heat waves, you now have more soil aridity. And then these things contribute to weather variability in the sense that you can no longer predict with some degree of certainty when you're going to have rainy season, when you're going to have dry season, and that messes up your developmental plans. If you're trying to construct something and suddenly you have a deluge in the middle of December, that in the north, traditionally that doesn't happen.
And that's what we're starting to see.
We're seeing that, yes.
Weather, more or less.
Yes. So those things affect development. But more importantly, when you have all these myriad challenges coming out of climate change issues, it tends to depress productivity because people are no longer focusing on the core issues of survival and development. They now have to deal with issues of morbidity, disease vectors thrive in a climate change environment, whether you have a wetter season or you have warmer temperatures. A lot of the disease vectors like mosquitoes thrive in those environments. So we're getting more morbidity. People are falling sicker, which is leading to more mortality. So it affects the productivity of the nation. Then you also look at agricultural productivity, as we said. You cannot develop if the mainstay of the economy is challenged. You cannot develop if you're having security threats. People are no longer free to move about, to travel because of security threats, or to go to the farm. So those things have an impact on development in so many ways.
So let's go back to health now. You mentioned it a little bit earlier while you were speaking, but is there a link between deforestation and air pollution with the rising cases of asthma and other respiratory diseases? And then when you look at COVID-19, which is also another respiratory challenge, is there a link between that and climate change?
Yes, there is a link between the pollution that we're putting out in terms of gas flaring, in terms of burning our forests, in terms of carbon emissions from our vehicles, in terms of the developmental habits we talked about. When you no longer have green grass and everything is bare land, sand that kicks up dust, when you have a landscape like that, you're going to have more airborne particles, which are harmful. So, on one hand, the fact that we have warming climate and less trees is exacerbating our health outcomes. But another way that climate change is threatening us, as I mentioned, is that it is affecting the natural relationship between man and microbes. Some organisms do better when you have warmer climates. Some organisms do better when you have wetter seasons. So when climate change interacts with those natural tendencies, you have disease outbreaks. We are now seeing a situation where over 60% of emerging diseases can be traced to the environment, what we're doing with our environment, how we are disrupting ecosystems. When you go into an area that has been historically forest and you cut down the trees and you dislodge the organisms living within that ecosystem, you're bound to have negative repercussions. And we're doing that more and more each day now.
Perhaps that's why we have so many zoonotic
viruses
coming up about. Okay, well, then there is another critical aspect, which is the use of trees as food fuel. We've been trying to battle that in Nigeria for many years. The previous administration of Goodluck Jonathan, had this attempt where they tried to purchase certain stoves that would, prevent the people who are cooking locally or in this manner from using the trees. But not much came out of that. And we still have this culture of people using firewood. So what do we do about that? Because it seems an insurmountable challenge.
Yes, the problem we have when we talk about deforestation, see, we're not saying you shouldn't use forest resources, you shouldn't use trees. The problem we have is nobody is replanting. We are using them in a way that is not sustainable. If you cut down one tree and you plant two, you don't have deforestation. You don't have an issue. So with regard to deforestation, we can do something about it, and that is to replant more than we are cutting down. But when it comes to the cooking fuel, as you mentioned, I think we need to transition. Some of these things we've been doing for the past 50 years. I remember growing up as a child, my parents, grandmother used to cook with wood. And you go into some of these places and we're still cooking with wood 50 years later. So we need to transition. The world has moved on. One of the things that troubles me the most in Nigeria is that we are flaring gas. We are burning up our gas resources at an alarming rate. Billions and billions of cubic feet of gas burnt, flared. That's what it means. We just burn it. Whereas we can use that gas to provide electricity, not just for Nigeria. You can use the gas to provide for the whole sub-Saharan Africa. The amount of gas we flare in a year is enough to power the whole of sub-Saharan Africa for many months. Then we can also say, let us liquefy the gas and do what we do in the US. You can cook with that gas in your homes. And that will take people away from using wood fuel, which is very, very harmful. It has been traced to infant mortality. It has been traced to adverse pregnancy outcomes, because a lot of the women cooking with wood usually have their baby strapped on their back. So as they're inhaling the smoke, the baby is also inhaling the smoke. So it leads to infant mortality and a whole lot of adverse consequences. Asthma, respiratory problems, even cancer. Prolonged exposure can cause those things. So we need to transition away from wood fuel to more sustainable and energy and cleaner energy sources.
So, Doctor, my final question to you very quickly, if you can just tell us, what would you say to the current generation, a generation of people who can make the difference, who have the power to make the difference, who have the opportunity to make the difference? What would you say on behalf of future generations to them?
Well, the quantum of information we have now has tipped the scale in favor of action. We are no longer doubting whether something is going on. You look at the global trend, we are having, since 1886, when record keeping started, this is the warmest decade on record. We just finished 2019. We're now moving into another decade, record temperature all over the world. We're looking at Arctic ice melting at a rapid pace. Over 50% of the ice in the Arctic is gone. Sea level is rising. We're seeing flooding everywhere where we never used to see flooding. Drought, wildfires all over the world. So clearly something is amiss, and we cannot hide from the reality anymore. This is the time for action. We need to look at what is causing global climate change, the way we use fossil fuel, with flaring gas, use of petrol to run our vehicles. We need to transition to electric vehicles, solar energy, and other alternative energy sources are becoming more affordable now. So we need to transition. It's an existential threat that we must embrace with a lot of courage.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for taking the time to come here and speak to us about this very crucial issue.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will be right back. It's always very enlightening talking to Dr. John Osonwa, and he raised so many critical issues and actions that we must take to make sure that the earth runs as it should. It's important to remember that while we need the earth to survive, the earth does not need us. So we have to take care of it if we intend to be here for a long, long time. Well, that's it on Exclusive Interview. Until we come your way again next time, thank you for stopping by.